today, this text works beautifully with us being able to sit at tables, because that's what we're going to talk about, sitting at the same table. How many of you grew up at family events with a kids' table? Oh, yeah. See, a lot of you did. You know what a kids' table is. And you got relegated to the kids' table. And when I was growing up, it was usually a folding table, like a card table. And if you were too rowdy, they would put the table on the porch. You know, you didn't even get to sit in the house. It might get set up in the living room or somewhere. You didn't get to eat in the room with the adults. Well, at least where I grew up, in my grandparents' house, we did not have a kids' table. I did not know what a kids' table was until I was a little bit older and started going places with my friends and seeing how they did things. What happened at my grandparents' house is we ate in shifts as family units. So it would be like my mom and dad and me and my brother, and then maybe one of his sisters and their kids. We would eat at the table together, and then the next shift would eat, and then the next shift would eat, because there just wasn't but so much space in the house. It was a fairly small house. And so I had no idea what a kids' table was until I started going with some friends to their house. And I found as I traveled, there were multiple different kinds of tables. So the most common one was a kids' table. So the kids were exiled to somewhere else in the house so that they didn't make too much noise or they didn't disturb everybody. But I went to other places where the men ate first, then the women, then the kids. Don't raise your hand if you ever ate there, or if that's the way you do it. This is a different sermon, okay? That's nothing to do with that, all right? But I would see that, you know, where they would go in that particular order, and that's the way they would eat. And the men would eat first, and they would eat together, and then the women would eat, and then the kids would get to eat because they may have only had one table. I never liked the kids' table concept. As a matter of fact, I pretty much hated it for a lot of reasons. Like, there was nothing worse than to be 16, 17, or 18 and end up at a table with 4 3-year-olds that were throwing food at each other. You know, because what I wanted to do is just pick my food up and just maul them with it, you know. But I didn't like that concept. I didn't like, you know, when I got stuck with the kid that nobody else wanted to sit with table. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Don't pretend like you don't. Yeah, nobody wanted to sit there, and so I ended up sitting with them or whatever. And my dad, being a pastor, you know, good Christian person, he said, "You need to sit with them." Don't nobody else want to. Why do I got to? You know, and that kids' table concept. And you know, the frustrating thing about the kids' table was there was no graduating date, right? They never said when you turn 18. You're going to get to come to the big person's table. There were 2 things that allowed you to go, maybe 3, but 2 specific things that allowed you to move to the adult table. Divorce and death, right? Somebody got divorced. They don't have anybody with them. There's an extra seat. Somebody died. There's an extra seat. It's kind of morbid when you think about it, right? Y'all didn't realize that y'all were moving up to the big table because somebody died or divorced, but that was what it won't, because you got old enough, right? If the table's full, the table's still full. Somebody's got to leave. Or the other reason could be somebody got sick. We're all sitting at separate tables this morning, and it's an interesting thing when you think about it, because we find reasons to sit at different tables now. For those of you who got here early and got to choose which table you wanted to sit at and who you were sitting with, you're semi-comfortable right now. For those of you who came in late and they sat you with somebody that you've never seen before, and you're like, I hope this don't get weird, you know, really quick. You're wondering, like, this could be strange. I've never seen church like this before. Who are these people? Why are they doing it this way? You're wishing you had gotten here early. Some of you probably have already punched your spouse and said, "See, I told you needed to get ready faster," right? And or, "See, I told you we should have stayed home today," one or the other. And we pick our tables that we want to sit at on a regular basis. And usually it is because of some division among us. It's a strange thing, the things that divide people and say, "I'm sitting at this table and not this table." Usually it has zero to do with eternity. and everything to do with something that we like or dislike or we want or don't want or something that matters not. Like right now, probably the number one thing that divides people in the world, in the United States, and probably the world, is politics. See, y'all are even afraid to laugh when I say it. Like, you know, now, me being an 8, I'm never scared to bring up politics or anything else because I like a good argument. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Sometimes I'll bring it up because I'm bored. Like, just, okay, we're going to talk here. Let's interject this in the conversation, see if it ticks them off. And that's just my nature. It's a terrible trait, okay? But it doesn't bother me. But I know family members right now who have not spoken in 4 or 5 years because of politics. The politics has divided them so deeply that they can't look people in the eye. They're unfriend people on Facebook. You know, because like they're at that table and I'm at this table. And we struggle. Some people will ask me occasionally, what's the toughest thing about pastoring? I would have told you something different 10 years ago. If you asked me today, I would tell you the number one challenge as a pastor is politics right now. Because MSNBC, CNN, and Fox are doing a better job at discipling the people in the kingdom of God than the church is. If you want to quote, they'll quote what this commentator said and what this person wrote and what this person thought, but they ain't quoting no scripture. And it's a challenge. I'm just being frank with you. And it's divided people to where they're like, well, if I'm this, I got to go to that church, and if I'm that, I got to go to this church, and if you watch this network, you can't be my friend, and if you voted for this person, you know, you can't be going to heaven. And I just want to help some of you right now before I talk about some other things. There's a 100% chance he's not going to ask you when you arrive at heaven, who'd you vote for? Okay, he's not going to ask you what news network you watched. He's not going to ask you who your favorite news commentator was. He's not going to ask you any of those things when you get there. The question he's going to want to know is, did you know Jesus? And I would tell you, well, I'm going to get way deep in my sermon before I want to. I would tell you right now, if you want to know somebody and what they say, know Jesus and what he says. That's the most important thing that you can know. And so there, but the thing is, like, politics is divisive. I get that. But we divide over a whole lot of other things. Like some of you right now are trying to decide, why does he not have his podium today? Right? Some of you hadn't noticed. Right? Some of you going, thank God he brought his table back. You're like, does that matter to people? 100%. When I put that podium up for the first time, where's your table? I don't like that podium. You know, like, do people really say that stuff to you? I swear they do. Yes. Is that bad? Am I allowed to do that? Anyway, I promise you they do. But we get divided over the craziest things, like, should we sing hymns or praise and worship? Should it be in a hymnal or on the wall? Should we wear suits and ties, or is it okay to wear blue jeans and our shirt tail out? We get divided over the craziest things. Should we have pews or chairs? Should we do something crazy different, like have communion around table, or should Sunday look exactly the same way every single week? And we end up at separate tables because we believe that whatever it is we've chosen to do is somehow better than what somebody else is doing. That somehow we're more in the know, or we're more spiritual, or we've arrived at a better place, or we like something, and so we choose the suit camp over the jeans camp, or we choose the hymn church over the praise and worship church, or we choose the church with pews over the church with chairs, until something happens that causes us to go, oh no, this is more important. And then we will sit with people that we didn't agree with, because now there's a more important issue, because it's the strangest thing how we can change tables and sit with people that we once disagreed with only because there was something bigger that we saw, and we chose to go to that table. So today, as we sit around tables, all of us at different tables, I would tell you that there are challenges for all of us and the things that divide us. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is coming to the same table. So as I did the children's lesson, the thing that they were make the most of every opportunity was what their takeaway was for today that they needed. The story of Joseph lent into that. So I was able to give you the summary of the story of Joseph and how he was sold into slavery, became a leader in Potiphar's house, thrown in jail, became a leader in the jail, later gets out of jail, comes to Pharaoh's palace, and he gets put in charge. There's only one person that's more important or more powerful than he is, and it's Pharaoh, and he's implemented this plan. So in chapter 43, where we are 9 years after he's told Pharaoh what the dreams mean. So we've had the 7 good years that he promised, okay? We're in year 2 of the famine. That's where we're at. And I tell you that because sometimes you read the Bible and you go chapter to chapter and you think it's day to day and year to year. And sometimes this story to this story may be 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, sometimes 400 years. There's a couple of stories that you can go hundreds of years in the Bible from this story to the next one. So we're 9 years after he's been brought to the palace. His brothers have shown up one time already and purchased grain and took it back. And Joseph toying with them because, listen, I see Joseph a lot different than other people do. I don't see Joseph as this underdog, poor, pitiful guy. Everywhere he went, the Lord was with him, and the Bible says, and he succeeded at everything he did. I don't really care where you get put. If the Lord is with you and you're going to have success wherever you go, that's what I want. So if I would rather be thrown in jail with the success of the Lord than to have the highest office in the land without his help. That's the way I would see it. And so anyway, he's kept one of the brothers in prison, Simeon, and the others have gone back. Benjamin did not come the first time. Jacob, the father, did not come the first time. He sent them back. One of the things that someone pointed out this past week on a post that I made was that they ate all of their grain before they went back for Simeon. They could have gone back for Simeon with their brother the next day, but they waited until they used it all up. It's like, he'll be fine. He's just in jail, right? You want those kind of brothers. And just in case y'all were wondering, these brothers apparently want the most caring for one another. They did not have, you don't want that kind of brother that's looking out for you. And so he's been in prison, and they are coming back for the second time. One of the things that happened after they left is they discovered they had money that they thought they had used to pay for it, and they're worried that something bad is going to happen when they arrive back. And so there's a couple of things I want to point out to you. One is unexpected blessings. Some things happen in your life you just can't explain. I don't know if you've ever had that, you didn't expect it, you didn't see it coming, and it just happened. Maybe somebody owed you money for 20 years and you had forgotten about it, you had moved on with your life, and they just showed up at your house one day and gave you the money. You were like, all right, weren't expecting this, Hey, this is a blessing. We were joking. We were recording podcast this week, and Pastor Jay, we were talking about communion. He said this past Sunday, he opened his communion cups, the disposable ones we had. He said, I had 2 wafers. He felt like, man, I have hit the jackpot. I got 2 pieces of Jesus on one Sunday, a blessing that you didn't expect. You just happens. We all have those, something good happens to us. We get a day off or a promotion or a raise or something that we hadn't been praying for, didn't see it coming, and it just happens. Well, that is what's happened in this story. It says this, it says the brothers approached the manager of Joseph's household and spoke to him at the entrance to the palace. Sir, they said, we came to Egypt once before to buy food, but as we were returning home, we stopped for the night and opened our sacks. Then we discovered that each man's money, the exact amount paid, was in the top of his sack. Here it is. We have brought it back with us. We also have additional money to buy more food. We have no idea who put our money in our sacks. Relax. Don't be afraid, the household manager said. your God, the God of your father, must have put this treasure into your sacks. I know I received payment. There's several things here that speak to me. One, the influence that Joseph must have had on this Egyptian manager to be able to say without thinking that the God of your father was the one that did this. He didn't even miss a beat. Joseph had so much influence on him that he was speaking about the God that they knew, the God that they understand. He says, the God of your father is the one that put it in your sacks. The second thing that sticks out to me is it was the God of their father that put that money in their sacks. It was the God of their father. While the brothers were throwing Joseph in a pit, God was thinking far enough ahead that one day they're going to show up and they're going to get a blessing that they had not expected and had not received. That's the beauty of God anyway, is while we're over here suffering, he's still planning it out. You're like, well, a man put it in the sack for them. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It was God that was at work that allowed that man to do that. Listen, sometimes God supernaturally shows up in my life and things happen that I cannot attribute to anyone else. But there are other things that he uses people specifically to bless me with words or things or a situation or wisdom or advice that I did not expect or did not see. God uses people in our lives to bless us in ways that we do not see. And I'm thankful that all of us, if we spoke about it, would understand that God gives us blessings that we did not expect, nor did we earn. God's in this entire story. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous lines in the Bible that gets used in a lot of ways comes at the end of this story, where Joseph looks at them and he says, what you meant for evil, God turned it for good. God was at work in the entire story. God didn't miss a beat. It worked out the way God needed it to work out. In the end, God used what they thought was a bad thing. But then it says the manager led them into Joseph's palace. He gave them water to wash their feet and provided food for their donkeys. The beauty of us taking communion around tables today is that the story of Jesus is he sat around the table with all of his disciples. And the night that he first gave them what we call communion, before he did that, he washed their feet. That's the beauty of the story. And it shows up here. He gives them water to wash their feet and food for their donkeys. And they were told they would be eating there. So they prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon. I would love to know what was going through their minds right now. Because it looks like a blessing. Like, right, you show up from Egypt, into Egypt from Canaan. You got money in your bag, and they're inviting you to eat in the palace with Joseph. You got to be like, oh, man, I have arrived. But I wonder if they were going, are they just giving us our last meal? Right? I wonder if they were thinking, there's a reason why they talk about a fatted calf. I think my grandfather used to call them, they finished the hogs. They were finishing them off. They gave them a different kind of food at the end right before they killed them, And I'm wondering if they're thinking, all right, they're just bringing us into the palace before they throw us all in jail or before they kill us all. Because sometimes it's not so easy to discern whether things are getting better or things are getting worse. As a matter of fact, they're going to think several times throughout this story, are things getting worse? They're going to wonder, is he going to take revenge? Is he going to hurt us? Is he going to harm us? And on the surface, it looks like, man, this is a blessing. But I am sure in their minds, they're going, oh, Lord, what's going to happen next? It can't be this good. Have you ever had those experiences? I've had some experiences in my life where this looks too good to be true. I dug in a little bit, and I realized, yep, it's too good to be true. Other times, everything looked good, and I just had to take a leap of faith, and it turned out okay. You don't always know if things are getting better or worse. You don't know if things are going to improve or if things are going to deteriorate. As a matter of fact, even after their dad dies, we won't preach on this. It comes a couple of chapters later. Even after their dad dies, they're worried that that he's going to turn on them. Well, Daddy's dead. Now he's going to turn on us. And so they go ask him, hey, are you going to kill us? I didn't expect him to say, well, yeah, I am. But he doesn't. You know, they're worried about what is going to happen. Second part of this, broken relationships can break spirits. Broken relationships break other things. The simple way people say it is hurt people hurt people. When people are hurt, it comes out in a lot of different ways. Strained relationships will put a strain on everything else you do. If you've ever had a strained relationship, particularly if it was a spousal relationship, and you would go to work and it affected your work. You would go to try to have fun, and it affected the fun that you were having. You would try to concentrate. It affected your ability to concentrate. Why? Because strained relationships strain everything else. And here's what I would tell you. Broken relationships will break other stuff. You'll find broken people who are breaking other people. I've seen people have a strained relationship, and it broke their job. It broke their health. It broke their other relationships that they had. It broke their mental health and capability to be able to deal with life. Because the strain of relationships puts pressure on us that we don't know what to do. And in some situations, leave us on the verge of tears. Now, I don't mind crying. I'll cry up here occasionally, but I'm not a baller most of the time. Okay, I'll cry. And I'll tell you why I cry. Anything that leaks won't swell. Some of y'all figure that out later, right? Some of you could stand to cry. But I'm not a baller. Typically. But there have been a few instances in my life that were so painful that if somebody said the wrong thing, if they brought up the wrong topic, it would just, just snot everything. I couldn't control it. And I suspect most of us in this room have had at least a moment or two where life was so pressure-filled, or we were so broken, or something was so bad that we walked around, and if somebody said just the wrong thing, and look, they're caught off guard too, right? They're like, oh my, what's wrong? What did I say? Because they didn't know what they had said, they didn't know what they had done, but it's something inside of you that's already broken, and what they say just kind of pulls that one last string or moves that one last vent out of the way, and it just comes pouring out. Broken relationships can break spirits. It says this, it says, when Joseph came home, they gave him the gifts they had brought him, then bowed low to the ground before him. Just stop right here. It says this twice in this passage. Well, I'll go to the second one before I talk about it. It says, after greeting them, he asked, how is your father, the old man you spoke about? Is he still alive? Yes, they replied, our father, your servant, is alive and well. And they bowed low. Again, two things about the bowing. One is prophetic in two ways. It answers a prophecy, because if you recall, the reason his brothers hated him is because he told them a dream, and he said, one day you're going to bow to me. And they're like, who's this idiot little kid telling us we're going to bow to him? No, we're not. And they sell him off to slavery. And guess what they're doing? They're bowing to him. It's also prophetic for what's going to happen in the hundreds of years that come to pass going forward. They're going to get used to bowing to a man and not bowing to God, and it's going to allow them to bow to Pharaoh, and this is how they're going to become enslaved. Anytime we practice bowing to anything other than God, we're practicing something that may cause us danger later down the road. It says they bowed low again. Then Joseph looked at his brother Benjamin, the son of his own mother. The reason why, if you can't piece all the pieces to the puzzle together, let me piece them together for you. The reason why Benjamin is so important to him is Benjamin is his only full brother. That Jacob is the father Rachel is the mother. She only had 2 kids, Joseph and Benjamin. It's his only full brother. That's why Benjamin is such a big deal. He's the baby of the bunch. And it says, is this your younger brother, the one you told me about? Joseph asked. And then he speaks to him. He says this one thing, may God be gracious to you, my son. He speaks life to him. Every year I'll have a word or a phrase or something that I'm working on. And last year the word was excellence. This year the word is 2 words. It's speak life. I don't naturally speak life into people outside of this pulpit. Like I think up here I do a pretty good job at it. But in general, I'm a progress person, and so I'm focusing on what needs to be fixed to make progress, and that can come across overly critical. As a matter of fact, when we go through the hiring process here, one of the questions that I always ask is, do you need positive affirmation on a regular basis? I ask them that. You can ask anybody on this staff that I've ever interviewed. I ask them that question. Do you need positive affirmation on a regular basis? Usually, they say no. If they lie to me, okay, they're the ones that get disappointed. Because like I'm not walking down the hall going high five, telling them, oh yeah, good job, good job. That's just not me. But it's something that I have worked on and I am trying to work on. And so this year I am working on not addressing problems all the time, but trying to speak life into situations. And the Bible tells us that the power of life and death is in our tongue. And the translation that I use says, and those who talk a lot will reap the consequences, right? And so you're either going to reap the consequences of life or you're going to reap the consequences of death. And Joseph's first words is, may God be gracious to you, my son. He speaks life over his brother. He's so excited to see him. But as soon as he speaks it, up until this point, he's been able to keep his cool. But as soon as he says something positive about his brother, all of those emotions that he had been holding in, all of that time that he had not seen his brother, I don't know how small his brother may have been when he left, all of those emotions, it says, then Joseph hurried from the room because he was overcome with emotion for his brother. He went into his private room where he broke down and wept. What Joseph really wanted was reconciliation with his brothers. The conflict that he's having, and I can appreciate this, is if they had thrown me in a pit, stole my coat, drugged me out, sold me to some other folks, and I was a servant, then I got thrown in jail, and now I'm in charge, there's going to be a piece of me that's going, I love them, but I'm going to make them pay. And I know y'all are all good saints around here, and you're looking at the bread and the juice in the middle of the table, and you're going, I'm going to talk about Jesus in a minute. But here's what I'm going to tell you. For most of you in this room, the same thought would have crossed your mind. How can I make them pay? What can I do? And he's got all of these emotions going on, and he looks at his brother and says, may the Lord be gracious to you. And it pulls one of those strings, and it just comes out. It's so real, it's so fresh, it's so present, like they're right there in front of him and they don't know. You understand that he's the only one in the room that knows. He's the only one in the room at this point that's carrying that burden, that's walking with that cross. He's the only one that's having this conflict. They don't know. They're like, hey, we're at the palace. Let's eat. The other guys in there, the Egyptians, they have no idea. It's just Joseph that's wrestling with these emotions, and sometimes it can break your spirit enough that you don't know what to do. It says he broke down and wept. And I just want to tell you, because some of you work really hard at holding it together, but there are some times in your life that you are susceptible to a breakdown. Everybody in this room is susceptible that at some moment the string's going to be pulled, the conflict's going to arise, the situation's going to come face to face, and it's just going to, you're just going to break down right in that moment. We're all capable. Everybody in this room is capable. Here's why those situations come about. Sin separates. As a matter of fact, the root of all division is sin. When sin showed up in the book of Genesis, what it did was divide the people from God. It separated them from God. And then we're going to start seeing it start separating people from people. Sin, you're going to see it in the first family. You don't even get out of the first four in the Bible, the first four people, before you see it separates them from God, and then it separates them from one another. Cain and Abel. Sin enters the picture, and they're separated. Sin is the root of all division. It is the reason why we think our way is better and their way is worse. It's why we think we've got the answers and they don't. It's why we think we're enlightened and they're not enlightened. And I just want to tell you that as much as you may think you're enlightened and they're not, there's somebody on the other side going, I'm enlightened and they're not. There's somebody in this world that thinks we're all idiots. You know, and so we have to understand that's present. Listen, and in the church, one of the dangers of religious people is we say, oh, well, I've got God on my side. Here's what I'm going to tell you. When division is present, most likely both of you have a little bit of sin involved. I'm not saying that some things aren't cut and dry, black and white, straightforward. I'm just saying usually there's sin that creeps into all of our lives that causes us. You know, Jesus told him in the New Testament, they were asking him about divorce. He said the reason why Moses allowed you to have divorce is because of the hardness of your hearts. The sin crept in and divided you. The story goes on like this. It says, after washing his face, he came back out, keeping himself under control. Then he ordered, bring out the food. And the waiter served Joseph at his own table, and his brothers were served at a separate table. The Egyptians who ate with Joseph sat at their own table because the Egyptians despised the Hebrews and refused to eat with them. And Joseph told each of his brothers where to sit, and to their amazement, he seated them according to age from oldest to youngest. And I don't know how they didn't figure it out to begin with. Because I could not see my brother for 40 years, and I'm pretty sure I could pick him out of a lineup. But when they start, you know, seating you by order, you'd think there was a tip-off. It says, and Joseph filled their plates with food from his own table, and the baby, all the older kids in here who've got baby brothers and sisters, say amen with me, giving Benjamin 5 times as much as the others gave the others, right? Come on now. Every time I read that, I think, I want to say Raymond. That's my brother's name. Every time I read it. I'm just kidding. So they feasted and drank freely with him. I'm reading, the paper Bible that I'm reading this year through is the Contemporary English Version. And the translations I grew up on said they drank and were merry. This says they drank freely. The translation that I read, the Contemporary English Version, says they got intoxicated. And when I read that, I was like, some of y'all saw what I posted this week. It was an enlightenment to me. Joseph apparently was the first person who got drunk and said, I love you, man. Because he reveals himself in the next chapter to his brothers. Anyhow, I don't want to ruin my sermon talking about that. But notice they're all at separate tables. Joseph because he's important. Joseph because of his pretentiousness. Joseph because of the top-down environment can't eat with anybody else. He eats by himself. He's at his own table. His brothers, because they're not supposed to be there, but they're there because he's playing games with them, are sitting at a separate table, and he can't tell them who he is because of the sin that they've committed years before by selling him into slavery, and they're sitting over there at their table. On the other side are the snobbish Egyptians who think they're better than the Hebrews, and they look down on them, and they wouldn't eat with the Hebrews anyway. And so you've got these 3 tables of people all eating separately for no apparent reason. What really needed to happen was in that room, reconciliation needed to happen. Really the most beautiful thing that could have happened and will happen in the next chapter we'll see is they could have been reconciled together. But instead they're sitting at different tables. And the frustrating thing about the kingdom of God is that we pick tables and choose tables and sit at tables. Let's just forget people who don't know Jesus. Inside the kingdom, we're sitting at our own table thinking that our table is somehow better and our way is better and our communion is better. Let me tell you something. Jesus Christ did not die so that we could sit at separate tables. Jesus Christ died to invite us all to one table. It's just one table. That's it. Jesus invites us to the table of the Lord. Last week, I mentioned about Judas sitting at the table. I wanted to read the passage out of John and how John describes it, because John is the disciple who Jesus loved. And he's sitting in the favorite place next to Jesus. And Jesus is speaking. He says in John chapter 13, I'm not saying these things to all of you. I know the ones I have chosen, but this fulfills the scripture that says, the one who eats my food has turned against me. I tell you this beforehand, so that when it happens, you will believe that I am the Messiah. I tell you the truth, anyone who welcomes my messenger is welcoming me, and anyone who welcomes me is welcoming the Father who sent me. Now Jesus was deeply troubled, and he exclaimed, I tell you the truth, one of you at the same table, one of you will betray me. What he's later going to say is the rest of you are going to turn your backs and deny me. He's going to speak to Peter specifically and say before it turns midnight tonight, you're going to deny that you even know who I am. But Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. And the disciples, as good church people would, looked at each other wondering whom he could mean. They didn't say, is he talking about me? You see, that's the right question to ask when we're presented with the gospel. Not what about them, it's what about me? Is it me that he's talking about? Am I the one that's going to betray him? Is it me that don't know something that's going on in my life? Is it me that needs to pay attention? And so it says the disciples looked at each other, and the disciple Jesus loved was sitting next to Jesus at the table. Simon Peter motioned to him to ask, who's he talking about? Right? Who's he talking about? Because we all want to know who the sinner in the room is. Can I tell you? The sinner at the table was all of them. The sinner at the table wasn't just Judas. The sinner at the table was Peter, who on the day of Pentecost is going to preach one of the greatest messages ever recorded, and 3,000 people get saved. But that night is going to deny, curse and deny that he knows Jesus. The rest of them are going to run, hide, be in fear, say we don't know anything about him. They're going to huddle together in a room and hope nobody finds them. They're all the sinner. And it's dangerous when we start trying to figure out who it is and who he's talking about. But it says Simon Peter asked him, who is it? So the disciple leaned over to Jesus and asked, Lord, who is it? Jesus responded, it is the one who I give bread to dip the bowl. And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, Simon Iscariot. At the same table, not separate tables. Jesus didn't put Judas at another table. He let him sit at the same table. He didn't put Peter at another table. He let him sit at the same table. The other 10 who are going to deny that they know him and run and hide, he didn't say, no, y'all got to sit at a separate table. I'm the only one can sit here. He said, no. He says, this is the table of the Lord. And you're welcome to come sit at the table. You see, the beauty of the table of the Lord is that we didn't earn the spot there. We didn't get there because we were sinless, because we had done something so good and we were so perfect. We got here because Jesus paid the price and said, come sit at the table. Come to the table of the Lord. That's the beauty of what communion is about, is that I get to come to the table with all of my flaws and failures, with the sins that I have repented of and the sins I'm not even aware of, the things that I know I've done and the things I don't know that I've done. I still get to come to the table because he calls me to the table. He invited them to the table. That's what's happening at communion, is that Jesus is calling us all to the same table. Not the Baptist table and the Pentecostal table and the Episcopal table and the Presbyterian table, not the hymn table and the praise and worship table, not the dressed up table and the dressed down table. He's calling us to the table of the Lord. And today what I call you to is the table of the Lord. Whatever you've done and wherever you've been and whatever has happened and whatever people say about you, whatever sins are in your past and whatever sins are in your future, I call you to the table of the Lord to partake with him today.